We ate with the window cracked, the evening air flattening the steam off our plates. Emma kept her napkin folded in a neat square, edges aligned, as if the small order would carry over to the rest of it. When I asked about the late nights, I kept my tone level, the kind of casual that doesn't demand anything back. She brushed her hair behind her ear. It was quick, almost automatic, a move that never belonged to idle conversation. "Trust me," she said, eyes on her fork. "It's just work." Her bracelet sat on the table by the salt, a nicked silver loop with a dull clasp. I'd found it years ago in a crowded little shop, glass case fogged from the owner's tea. I could see the tiny scratch near the hinge where I'd fumbled with the gift wrap in the car. It wasn't on her wrist tonight. It hadn't been for a while. She glanced at it without touching it, then steadied her fork and took another bite. The clock above the stove ticked in a soft, confident way. Somewhere down the block, a car door closed. The room had that day's-end patience you only notice when you stop filling it with talk. "I'm glad you're excited," I said. "You've wanted that kind of pace." She answered. "It's a push. Short term." A noodle curled at the edge of her plate like it had decided to stay behind. She lifted it, then set the fork down again, as if remembering she'd already said enough. Her phone buzzed face down on the chair beside her. Neither of us looked at it right away. "New project?" I asked. "New people," she said, which wasn't quite the question I'd asked. Then lighter. "You know how it is. Everyone trying to prove they belong." She smiled at the middle distance, and reached for her water, the glass leaving a round wet print. The smile held a moment too long, a little too careful at the corners. I set my knife across my plate, and moved the bracelet away from the edge of her sauce, thumb catching on the cold metal. "You left this on the dresser again?" "Yeah," she said, eyes flicking to it. "I didn't want to snag it on my sweater. It was sleeveless weather." I let the pause settle and watched a strand of hair fall loose across her cheek. She didn't put the bracelet on. She didn't move it back either. The phone buzzed again. She slid it further under the chair as if the floorboards were somehow quieter. "Anything else you want me to know?" I asked. Not an accusation. Just a line on a map. She shook her head slow. "No. It's just busy. You know how quarter ends can be." The words came packaged, like something she'd borrowed from a meeting agenda. She offered the half-smile she gives coworkers in passing, the one that promises civility without weight. I nodded. There was a time I would have filled the space with follow-ups. Names, times, a why that could anchor the drift. Instead, I reached for the pepper and turned it twice over my plate, the grains dotting the sauce like ash on snow. We finished without hurry. She stacked our dishes, hands steady, and carried them to the sink. Water ran. Plates clinked. The window carried the faint sound of a neighbor's TV. I wiped the table, working around the circle left by her glass. The bracelet stayed near the salt, catching nothing. When she came back, she stood with her palms pressed into the wood like she was bracing against a train's vibration. "Thanks for understanding," she said. I looked at her, then at the bracelet, then at the place her wrist used to wear it without thinking. "I hear you," I said. She waited for a reaction I didn't offer. The waiting ended when her phone buzzed a third time and she said she'd be right back. Some quick errand to the bedroom that didn't need explaining. I picked up the bracelet and set it on the dresser on my way to the sink. The metal felt cooler than the air. I left the kitchen light on, the window still open, and let the house hold the rest. The next few days thinned out into small routines. The bracelet stayed where I'd left it on the dresser, a crescent of dull metal catching no light. Emma moved around it like it was part of the furniture she'd learned not to bump. Her nights stretched. She'd say she needed to wrap something, and slide her phone into her pocket on the way to the hallway. The soft click of the bedroom door would follow, then her voice turned down to a hush that made the rest of the house sound loud. I'd rinse a glass I didn't need rinsed. I'd listen to the hum of the refrigerator and the clock's slow count. When she came back, she'd offer a smile that almost reached her eyes, then skim past the dresser without looking at it. I started waking at odd hours without checking the time. Streetlight cut through the blinds and bars. Once, at what felt like the center of the night, I heard her laugh, bright, careful, trained to sound effortless. The words were sanded down by distance, but a phrase slid clear enough to catch. "That joke he told." Then a first name I'd heard maybe twice in passing, attached to a department I didn't pretend to understand. I lay still. She let the laugh taper and listened to a silence I couldn't hear, then said, "No, it's just work stuff," in a tone that assumed agreement. Friends started to orbit differently. A group text turned into links and light emojis I wasn't sure were meant for me. When we met them for coffee on Saturday, they'd positioned their chairs to face her. "You must be slammed," one said. Burning it at both ends, huh? She made a show of waving it off. They all watched the wave more than the words. I caught 2 glances aimed at me, quick and neutral, then redirected to her, where they settled. I kept to the edges of the conversation. There was talk about an offsite coming up, then someone said too casually, "Is that the one with your, what's his name?" Emma's eyes flicked to the door behind them, then down, then up again. "Different team," she said, light as tissue. I let the pause settle. No one asked me anything I could answer without dragging the tone into something heavier. Back home, she adjusted her calendar on the fridge and turned the magnetic marker slowly in her fingers. The bracelet on the dresser stayed put through the whole week. She used to wind it around her wrist without thinking, a habit learned and unlearned long before either of us noticed it. Now she left the house without it. On Sunday night, I moved it a few inches while dusting, not to test her, just to see if anything would shift. Nothing did. One evening, coming in with groceries, I heard her in the kitchen before she knew I was there. The same laugh, softer. "No, he doesn't care. It's harmless. Just a joke," she said. The word harmless hung in the room like steam off a pan, nothing visible, enough to change the air. I stepped into view and set the bags down. She ended the call quickly and asked about dinner. I gave her the list of what I'd bought, and watched her nod as if the nod could fold the conversation away. Our friends started sending her articles about balance and taking time. They sent me a podcast link about patience. I didn't reply to either. When we joined them for a quick drink midweek, one of them asked Emma if she was keeping boundaries. The phrase landed and stayed there. She said, "Of course," with a practiced tilt to her head. The bartender set drinks down. I tipped a little extra and kept my mouth shut. The room settled into a buzz that didn't include us as a pair, just 2 people who happened to share a table. That night, I lay awake and stared at the dresser in the dark. The bracelet was only a darker shape against the deeper dark. A car passed outside and the light moved across the ceiling, then was gone. In the stillness after it, I could hear our windows breathe. I wasn't collecting proof. I was noticing a pattern. It didn't ask for commentary. It asked for space, and I gave it what it wanted. Morning thinned the dark and laid itself across the kitchen like gauze. I opened the junk drawer for a pen. Rubber bands, a spare key, a dried-out marker. Under a takeout menu, something folded twice, neat, like it had been placed there on purpose and not dropped. I unfolded it. A receipt from a small place near the river. The handwriting across the top wasn't the server's, ink pressed hard enough to faintly emboss the paper below. Lunch was nice. A number followed, no name, not the restaurant's. Her name sat on the signature line in her tidy print. I let the paper rest in my palm for a moment, the way you hold a coin to feel its weight. Not evidence, just direction. I set the pen aside and kept the receipt. Emma was at the mirror by the front door, running her fingers through her hair, smoothing what didn't need smoothing. She saw me in the glass, then turned. Her wrist was bare. The old bracelet stayed on the nightstand lately, gathering dust in the curve where it lay. "When did you go to the river place?" I asked. No heat to it, just the words. Her hand went to her ear, then to her hair, tucking a strand that didn't need tucking. "Oh, last week? Maybe Friday. It was a work thing." "With who?" "The team," she said, too quick, the smile a shade bright. "It was a whole thing with the project. You know how it is." I looked down at the paper. "You kept the receipt. I must have thrown it in there," she said, eyes flicking to the drawer, then back. The smile sat there, then slackened, then came back as if she remembered it was supposed to be on. "Why? There's a number." She stepped forward and reached for it. I didn't pull away. She glanced at the digits and tipped the corner of her mouth up. "Probably the place. Or the courier. We were sorting deliveries. That's not the restaurant's area code. It doesn't matter," she said softly, then added brighter. "It's all work, trust me." Her phone buzzed twice on the console. A quick stack of messages slid over the lock screen. Names from our group thread blinked in the corners, small jokes, a plan I hadn't heard about. She glanced down, thumbed a reply without unlocking it, and set it face down. The buzz, then stillness. It felt like she was standing in a different room I couldn't see, door ajar, voices lowered. I tried a different angle. "What did you order?" She blinked, surprised by the smallness of it. "The salad." A short pause. "They had the soup." Just that shift. I let it pass. I set the receipt on the counter beside her keys. Not pointed, just placed. She waited for a reaction I didn't offer. "I'm late," she said, relief threading her tone. She kissed the air next to my cheek, caught the strap of her bag on her shoulder, and was in shoes and out the door in practice motions. The door clicked. The house exhaled. I stood there a minute longer and listened to the quiet resettle. On the table, the pen lay beside the folded paper, straight lines against wood. Down the hall, in our room, the bracelet stayed where it had been, the soft metal dulled by dust and time. I didn't move it. I wasn't going to trail the number or chase the story. I'd already learned more by noticing what was put in front of me. So I left the receipt where she'd see it when she got home, and I let the space do what it does. She came in late and slept hard. The house held the weight of it. Before sunrise, I woke to the dull blue of the window and the small light on her charger. Her phone lay face down, half under a sleeve she'd tossed aside. I didn't hurry. I watched the slow rise of her shoulder, the way she had curled away from my side during the night. The bracelet was on the nightstand where I'd left it, the metal gone soft with age, a tiny nick in the clasp I'd never noticed until now. Dust made a faint ring beneath it. A brief vibration from the phone broke the quiet. One name I recognized from her stories about the office. The same coworker, the one who kept appearing at the edges of things. I let the pause settle, then turned the phone over. No secrets written in bold letters. Just a thread that had been growing, timestamp piled on timestamp, their short messages stacked past midnight. Inside jokes about a client's obsession with graphs. A picture of a coffee cup ring on a legal pad with a scribble, the kind of nothing you only send to someone you expect to get it. You made the long day better, paired with a wry face. Glad you got home. At 12:43, and a reply with a loop of thank yous that read warmer than they needed to. I didn't scroll for the beginning. I didn't search the names of restaurants or streets. The tone was enough. It was the brightness from her phone calls, carried into text. It lived in the gaps between their words, where things felt understood without being said. There was another ping, our friends' group chat. Plans had shifted again, the thread moving around a time that worked for her. They were gentle about it. If Emma's slammed, we can push, someone wrote. No one asked me. It wasn't unkind. It was a quiet recalibration. I watched the dots appear and disappear as they sorted out the evening. My name stayed out of it. I put her phone back, face down under the sleeve. I set the bracelet a fraction straighter, then left it. In the kitchen, the kettle took its time. The first sparrow started in the hedges. The house softened into morning. When she came in, she'd see the receipt where I left it on the table, the same hand-drawn loop around a date, and a number I didn't use. She'd see the ring of dust under the bracelet she no longer wore. She'd see my mug by the sink, a line of coffee along the rim where I'd set it down without wiping it clean. I didn't rehearse what I'd say. I wasn't taking inventory or preparing a case. I had the shape of it, which was more than I'd had a week ago. The facts were ordinary and steady. Their weight held without me pushing on them. Upstairs, she shifted and pulled the blanket tighter. Her shoulder rose and settled. I stood by the window until the light sharpened and laid a stripe across the table, catching lightly on the folded paper. Then I went to work like I always did, keys in the bowl by the door, a quiet click behind me. I knew where I stood, and I gave the day room to tell me the rest. By late afternoon the house had the kind of quiet that makes its own outline. The note on the counter was neat, efficient. Late, don't wait. Our shared calendar had already announced it 2 hours earlier, blocks of color dropping into place without my hand on any of it. Client dinner, early start, weekend prep. The phrasing suggested decisions made elsewhere and carried through. I set my keys in the bowl and let my coat hang open. The folded paper from the morning sat where I'd left it, still face down. Upstairs, the nightstand wore a faint crescent of dust where the bracelet had been. I hadn't moved it. If she hadn't put it back. My phone buzzed in a soft cluster. A friend with the kind of careful punctuation people use when they don't want to step on anything. Hey man, saw Emma's slam this week. You good to rain check Saturday? Another text arrived a moment later, this time from someone closer to her. We're grabbing a quick drink near the office after their thing. Swing by if you want. The invitation was aimed past me, but not unkind. I sent a simple reply and left it at that. In the kitchen I reheated soup and ate standing up. When she called, the line had the wide hallway sound of bad reception. Don't wait up, she said, light practiced. We wrapped late and might keep talking. Though we asked not to be examined. I let the pause settle. Okay, I said, and rinsed the bowl. Around 8 I walked to the corner place out of habit. 2 couples from our circle were already there, their coats folded behind them. Conversation dimmed by a degree before warming again. Someone touched my arm, asked about work, asked if I'd tried the new roast. Their eyes kept glancing past the window, like they were expecting a train to arrive. When Emma's name came up, it took on the gentle handling of something being moved from one shelf to another. I listened and didn't correct anything. They waited for a reaction I didn't offer. After a while I finished my coffee and nodded my way out. Back home, the house took me in without comment. A group message flashed on the tablet we never put away. The thread carried her forward, plans forming around her with the ease of water finding a channel. Small hearts, small words, steady approval. I watched the flow for a minute, the coworker's name surfacing, then sinking again. I set the tablet face down next to the folded paper. She came in late, quiet on the stairs. The light caught on her wrist when she reached past me for a glass. Bare. The pale mark where metal had rested for years was almost gone. Long day, she said, not asking for mine. I nodded. She waited, then let it pass. Our voices moved around each other like people in a narrow hallway. Before bed I opened the top drawer and found the bracelet tucked under a scarf, a single link bent, clasp stubborn. I turned it in my fingers until the shape made sense again, then set it back the way I'd found it. Downstairs, I cleared the counter and flipped the note into the trash. The lines were being drawn without ceremony. I stopped trying to color them in and watched where everyone placed themselves. We went because not going would have said more. Small apartment, soft lamps, the hum of a playlist that knew better than to intrude, coats piled on a chair, glasses set out in a row like a suggestion. Emma moved through the room with that polished ease she learned at work, names, smiles, quick touches to an elbow. I took my place at the end of the table where I could see the doorway and the sink. She sat opposite, sleeves pushed up. Her wrist was bare. I noticed the pale line where the bracelet would have been and let the thought pass. The talk was light until it wasn't. A friend, well-meaning, careless, leaned back and said something about the long project and how it must be easier now that she and that old coworker had figured out a rhythm. A couple of heads turned fast, then settled on their plates as if they'd been waiting for an oven to preheat. Someone reached for bread they didn't want. Emma gave a laugh that landed close to the edge. "It's just work," she said, like a line she knew would keep the table moving. She brought her hand up, thumb rubbing the skin where the bracelet should have been, then dropped it and reached for her glass. I watched the gesture travel the room and come back empty. I didn't save her and I didn't test her. I let the pause be a pause. The clink of cutlery filled it in. The friend colored a little, apologized to no one in particular, and nudged the topic toward vacations. Another voice chimed in about flights, then about luggage. I stayed with the earlier words the way you sit with a song stuck in your head until it quiets on its own. A corner of the table grew warm to her, questions wrapping themselves in concern that sounded like permission. They asked about late nights without saying late nights. They asked about teamwork without saying pair. She nodded through it, offering phrases with soft edges. "We're under a deadline. It's been intense. It's good to have support." I caught the way their eyes checked me as they agreed with her. They looked to see if I would make this harder. I gave them nothing to push against. I cut my chicken in even bites and kept my elbows off the table. Someone relaxed once they read the message. The conversation picked up speed without me. In the kitchen after, I stacked plates and ran the tap low. A friend hovered, then mentioned how tough quarter end gets and how no one should read into it. There was space left at the end of the sentence. I rinsed a wineglass, handed it over, and said, "I'm not." That was true enough for the room we were in. We returned to the table and dessert appeared as if conjured, store-bought, barely disguised. Emma smiled at the effort, thanked our hosts like she owed them more than manners. When she gestured, her sleeve slid and the bare wrist flashed again. A couple of people looked away on reflex. She tucked her hand under the table. On the way out, shoes scraped the entry mat. The hallway was narrow, the kind that makes you politely sequence yourself. She reached for the keys and missed, then laughed like it was nothing, and we filed into the night air. Streetlights did their plain work. I walked beside her, a half step back, listening to the city breathe under the quiet. At home the drawer upstairs would have held the bracelet, a link straightened, the clasp ready. She'd left it there. I'd left it there. No speech attached to either choice. In the car, she turned on the radio to fill the space and turned it back off just as quickly. The evening hadn't given answers. It had given positions. I noted who closed ranks around her and who stayed neutral. I didn't challenge any of it. I locked the front door, set the empty bottle by the sink for recycling, and let the dishes wait. The room knew what had been said and what hadn't, and that was enough for now. We didn't wait until morning. She stood by the sink, fingers on the edge of the counter, as if the laminate had something to say. The radio was still off. Streetlight pushed through the blinds in neat bands. Tell me which parts are actually work, I said. No heat, just the question. Deadlines, she said. Team meetings that spill over. The usual words. She watched my face for a cue and found none. Which nights? I said. She took a breath that sounded like she'd rehearsed it. It changes. You know how it is in a crunch. I let the pause settle. It stretched in a straight line between us. I went upstairs and opened the drawer. The bracelet lay where we'd both left it. A link slightly bent, the clasp smooth from years of use. I brought it down and set it on the counter. Not in the center. Just close enough to be part of the conversation without being named. Her eyes dropped to it, and then to her empty wrist. A small shift in her jaw. She waited for a reaction I didn't offer. My phone buzzed, then hers. Group thread from dinner, idle comments tapering into tentative goodnights. Then her screen lit again with a call. One of the same friends. The name bright in the dark kitchen. She answered, speaker by accident or habit, I couldn't tell. Hey, the voice said, too bright. You get home safe? Listen, if he asks, I can say we ran late at my place again. Like last Tuesday. And the week before. Same story. It'll land. Emma closed her eyes the way you do when a light is too sharp. She fumbled for the volume. The room didn't move. I'm covered, she said, steadying her voice. I'll call you tomorrow. Okay, our friend said, a beat of silence on her end. I just don't want you caught. People were looking at you tonight. It's getting anyway. Night. The line died. The kitchen returned. She meant well, Emma said. I know, I said. She tried to build new scaffolding. You know the workload. You know how the team leans on me. She stopped before the name. It helps to have someone there who gets it. Someone keeps showing up, I said. That much is clear. She reached for the bracelet, and then pulled her hand back. I was going to wear it tonight, she said too fast. The clasp, I couldn't get it to hold. You could have asked, I said. Her laugh came out without air. I didn't want to make it a thing. Another buzz on the counter. The same friend, this time a message. I'll stick to the Tuesday cover if anyone circles back. Promise. It wasn't the worst thing to read. It was just exact. Emma's shoulders dropped, as if the hinge finally gave. I made it messy, she said, eyes on the bracelet, voice smaller than the kitchen. I didn't list anything. I didn't rewind the week. We're past the part where a neat story would help. She nodded, face blanking the way people learn to do in open-plan offices. Do you want me to sleep in the guest room? She asked. I want the noise to stop, I said. For now. She took her phone and a folded sweater and went down the hall without closing the door. I stayed where I was, the light striping the counter, the bracelet catching a line of orange. The house held the shape of what had just slipped out. The cover stories had done their work until they didn't. I turned off the kitchen light and left the bracelet where it was. It wasn't a decision to fix anything. It was a place to stop. Morning rinsed the house in a flat, forgiving light. The guest room door stood ajar, the bed made, the kind of neat that comes from not sleeping. In the kitchen, the counter wore the same quiet stripes as last night, but the spot where the bracelet had caught the orange was clean. No outline. No metal. Just a white place that didn't owe me an explanation. I made coffee, took it black. The first sip settled something simple. Eat, wait, a reason to stand still. I didn't go looking for the bracelet. I didn't ask. My phone started with the polite messages first. Are you around today? Thinking of you. A few came from people who used to lean toward Emma's side of the table, the ones who laughed a beat too fast when she made light of late nights. Now their language turned neutral, almost gentle. No one asked for her version. They asked for mine and then backed away before I offered one. Our group thread lit up with a change of plan for next weekend. The host shifted it to a smaller thing. Whoever can make it. Names listed without Emma's. No commentary. Just a revised guest count. Someone added me to a new thread titled just by the date. I noted the omission and let it pass. Shifting loyalties don't make noise. They reorganize the furniture while you're making coffee. I texted Emma. I'll be out for a bit. We can handle logistics later. She read it and stopped, typed again. Can we talk? I watched the dots for a moment longer than necessary and put the phone face down. The house didn't need a reply to function. I packed a small bag, 2 shirts, a notebook, the charger that always goes missing, then reappears right where I left it. I took the spare key off the hook and set it near the fruit bowl. The bowl needed a rinse. I left that for later. On the dresser in our room, the nightstand had a pale ring where the bracelet used to live. There was a faint mark on the wood, a quiet reminder that things leave shapes even after they're gone. I stood there long enough to confirm what I already knew. I wasn't going to ask where it went. Some questions are just nets. You throw them and drag back the same tangle you started with. By noon, another message from a friend. If you need a place to sit and not talk, our porch is empty. No pressure. I appreciated the phrasing. Space without agenda? They didn't mention Emma. They didn't mention the coworker or the party. They were making room, cautiously, like people inching chairs away from a table with a short leg. Emma moved through the house with a soft efficiency. Drawers opened and closed. A suitcase rolled once over the threshold of the guest room and stopped. I kept to the hallway while she passed with the practiced glance of two people sharing a small stage. She waited in the doorway as if a line might come to her. I let the pause settle. Nothing did. I left a short note on the counter. Back in a few days. Send me the bills. We'll sort the rest soon. It wasn't strategy. It was a schedule. On my way out, I took a last look at the table where we'd had that first dinner. Same chairs. Same wood grain. The difference sat in the empty spaces, the ones we'd worn into our habits, and the one where a bracelet had been. The afternoon air met me without ceremony. No revelation, just distance measured in a set of steps and a door clicking shut behind me. My phone buzzed once more and then went quiet. I let it. I didn't need everyone to understand. I needed room to walk in a straight line and keep it that way.